Day 149. 2 Chronicles 7-9. When Solomon had finished praying, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. The priests were unable to enter the house of the Lord, because the glory of the Lord had filled it. When all the Israelites saw the fire coming down and the glory of the Lord above the temple, they bowed down on the pavement with their faces to the ground. And they worshipped and gave thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his loving devotion endures forever. Then the king and all the people offered sacrifices before the Lord. And King Solomon offered a sacrifice of 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the people dedicated the house of God. The priests stood at their posts, as did the Levites with the musical instruments of the Lord, which King David had made for giving thanks to the Lord and with which David had offered praise, saying, "For his loving devotion endures forever." Across from the Levites, the priests sounded trumpets. And all the Israelites were standing. Then Solomon consecrated the middle of the courtyard in front of the house of the Lord, and there he offered the burnt offerings and the fat of the peace offerings, since the bronze altar he had made could not contain all these offerings. So at that time Solomon and all Israel with him, a very great assembly of people from Lebo-hamath to the Brook of Egypt, kept the feast for 7 days. On the 8th day they held a solemn assembly, for the dedication of the altar had lasted 7 days, and the feast 7 days more. On the 23rd day of the 7th month, Solomon sent the people away to their homes, joyful and glad of heart for the good things that the Lord had done for David, for Solomon, and for his people Israel. When Solomon had finished the house of the Lord and the royal palace, successfully carrying out all that was in his heart to do for the house of the Lord and for his own palace, the Lord appeared to him at night and said to him, "I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. If I close the sky so there is no rain, or if I command the locust to devour the land, or if I send a plague among my people, and if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayers offered in this place. For I have now chosen and consecrated this temple so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my heart will be there for all time. And as for you, if you walk before me as your father David walked, doing all I have commanded you, and if you keep my statutes and ordinances, then I will establish your royal throne, as I covenanted with your father David when I said, you will never fail to have a man to rule over Israel. But if you turn away and forsake the statutes and commandments I have set before you, and if you go off to serve and worship other gods, then I will uproot Israel from the soil I have given them. And I will banish from my presence this temple I have sanctified for my name. I will make it an object of scorn and ridicule among all the peoples. And when this temple has become a heap of rubble, all who pass by it will be appalled and say, why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple? And others will answer, because they have forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshipping and serving them. Because of this, he has brought all this disaster upon them. Now at the end of the 20 years during which Solomon had built the house of the Lord and his own palace, Solomon rebuilt the cities Hiram had given him and settled Israelites there. Then Solomon went to Hamath-zobah and captured it. He built Tadmor in the wilderness, in addition to all the store cities that he had built in Hamath. He rebuilt Upper and Lower Beth-horon as fortified cities with walls, gates, and bars, as well as Baalath, all the store cities that belonged to Solomon, and all the cities for his chariots and horses, whatever he desired to build in Jerusalem, Lebanon, and throughout the land of his dominion. As for all the people who remained of the Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, the people who were not Israelites, their descendants who remained in the land, those whom the Israelites were unable to destroy, Solomon conscripted these people to be forced laborers, as they are to this day. But Solomon did not consign any of the Israelites to slave labor, because they were his men of war, his officers and captains, and the commanders of his chariots and cavalry. They were also the chief officers for King Solomon, 250 supervisors. Solomon brought the daughter of Pharaoh up from the city of David to the palace he had built for her. For he said, my wife must not live in the house of David king of Israel, because the places the ark of the Lord has entered are holy. At that time Solomon offered burnt offerings to the Lord on the altar of the Lord he had built in front of the portico. He observed the daily requirement for offerings according to the commandment of Moses for Sabbaths, new moons, and the 3 annual appointed feasts, the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of weeks, and the feast of tabernacles. In keeping with the ordinances of his father David, Solomon appointed the divisions of the priests over their service, and the Levites for their duties to offer praise and to minister before the priests according to the daily requirement. He also appointed gatekeepers by their divisions at each gate, for this had been the command of David, the man of God. They did not turn aside from the king's command regarding the priests or the Levites or any matter concerning the treasuries. Thus all the work of Solomon was carried out, from the day the foundation was laid for the house of the Lord until it was finished. So the house of the Lord was completed. Then Solomon went to Ezion-Geber and to Elath on the coast of Edom. So Hiram sent him ships captained by his servants, along with crews of experienced sailors. They went with Solomon's servants to Ophir and acquired from there 450 talents of gold, which they delivered to King Solomon. Now when the queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon, she came to test him with difficult questions. She arrived in Jerusalem with a very large caravan, with camels bearing spices, gold in abundance, and precious stones. So she came to Solomon and spoke with him about all that was on her mind. And Solomon answered all her questions, nothing was too difficult for him to explain. When the queen of Sheba saw the wisdom of Solomon, the palace he had built, the food at his table, the seating of his servants, the service and attire of his attendants and cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he presented at the house of the Lord, it took her breath away. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your words and wisdom is true. But I did not believe the reports until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not half of the greatness of your wisdom was told to me. You have far exceeded the report I heard. How blessed are your men! How blessed are these servants of yours who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you to set you on his throne to be king for the Lord your God. Because your God loved Israel enough to establish them forever, he has made you king over them to carry out justice and righteousness." Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, a great quantity of spices, and precious stones. There had never been such spices as those the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. The servants of Hiram and of Solomon who brought gold from Ophir also brought algum wood and precious stones. The king made the algum wood into steps for the house of the Lord and for the king's palace, and into lyres and harps for the singers. Never before had anything like them been seen in the land of Judah. King Solomon gave the queen of Sheba all she desired, whatever she asked, far more than she had brought the king. Then she left and returned to her own country, along with her servants. The weight of gold that came to Solomon each year was 666 talents, not including the revenue from the merchants and traders. And all the Arabian kings and governors of the land also brought gold and silver to Solomon. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold, 600 shekels of hammered gold went into each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold, 300 shekels of gold went into each shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Additionally, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps, and a footstool of gold was attached to it. There were armrests on both sides of the seat, with a lion standing beside each armrest. 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one at either end of each step. Nothing like this had ever been made for any kingdom. All King Solomon's drinking cups were gold, and all the utensils of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. There was no silver, because it was accounted as nothing in the days of Solomon. For the king had the ships of Tarshish that went with Hiram's servants, and once every 3 years the ships of Tarshish would arrive bearing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. So King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. All the kings of the earth sought an audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom that God had put in his heart. Year after year, each visitor would bring his tribute, articles of silver and gold, clothing, weapons, spices, horses, and mules. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horses, which he stationed in the chariot cities and also with him in Jerusalem. He reigned over all the kings from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines, as far as the border of Egypt. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar as abundant as sycamore in the foothills. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and from all the lands. As for the rest of the acts of Solomon, from beginning to end, are they not written in the records of Nathan the prophet, in the prophecy of Ahijah the Shilonite, and in the visions of Iddo the seer concerning Jeroboam son of Nebat? Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel 40 years. And Solomon rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of his father David. And his son Rehoboam reigned in his place. John 11 verses 1 to 29. At this time a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary, whose brother Lazarus was sick, was to anoint the Lord with perfume and wipe his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When Jesus heard this, he said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So on hearing that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 days, and then he said to the disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "Rabbi," they replied, "the Jews just tried to stone you, and you are going back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? If anyone walks in the daytime, he will not stumble, because he sees by the light of this world. But if anyone walks at night, he will stumble, because he has no light." After he had said this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he is sleeping, he will get better." They thought that Jesus was talking about actual sleep, but he was speaking about the death of Lazarus. So Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas called Didymus said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, so that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already spent 4 days in the tomb. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, a little less than 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them in the loss of their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." "Your brother will rise again," Jesus told her. Martha replied, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she answered, "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world." After Martha had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside to tell her, "The teacher is here and is asking for you." And when Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him.